Welcome to the Rainmaker Podcast, where we elevate marketing leaders inside and out. I'm your host, Veronica Rami, master marketer, executive leader, and mentor to ambitious marketing leaders wanting to advance their careers. Each episode is filled with genuine, unscripted conversations with some of the world's top marketing experts, accomplished leaders, and industry trailblazers representing brands, both large and small. Our goal with this podcast and everything we do is to help you master your role, nurture your team, prioritize your well-being, and evolve into an industry-leading rainmaker. This is the Rainmaker Podcast. On this podcast episode, I'm so excited to introduce to you an unknown marketing leader with over 2 decades of experience. Our esteemed guest, Durriya Gunja, began her career as a graphic designer and has since risen literally to the top as the head of global brand experience, creative services, and integrated marketing strategy at a company you will definitely know called Chicken Soup for the Soul. She's truly an empowering female with a ton of experience, and we got into it all. Her journey as a female marketing leader, balancing motherhood and ambition, her key strategy for securing promotions. Literally, my mouth dropped when I heard how she secures her own promotions. And then breaking through the stereotypes of the creative side of marketing and how that doesn't prevent you from being a top marketing leader. So without further ado, let's make it rain with Durriya. Durriya, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Okay, I'm so excited to have you. One, because you and I have a mutual friend that we both love and adore, Mr. Tim Wilson from your days at Office Depot and a fellow Boca Raton native. Or not, he's a native, but I'm a native that I got to meet him in Boca Raton who connected us. I'm really excited to have you on the podcast because anybody who looks at your resume, I mean, you've climbed the ladder, you've done the hard work, and you're one of the few, I would say, very successful female marketers who've like made it to the top and then some. And I don't see too many women at the top of any ladder, so, let alone this particular lane, this particular industry. And I am in a position where I get to mentor and coach a lot of different women, female marketers. And I think that our struggles in pursuing our ambition all the way is harder because we also have families and we don't want to ever compromise on our personal values and have regrets that we weren't there for those that we love the most. And so I would just love to have this conversation with you because I'm dying to kind of understand how you did this for yourself because you are also a family woman, and also whatever advice that you have to share to other women that are aspiring for more without wanting to compromise the things that matter most to them. So let's start with your career journey. Did you always know that you were this ambitious and wanting and achieving more?
So I don't know if I always knew I was this ambitious, but I definitely became very ambitious. I
Okay.
was headstrong always,
Yes.
but maybe not in the right way. But you learn that when you have a kid who is headstrong and it's a quote unquote difficult child,
Yes.
you have a leader.
Yes.
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 And it's hard to raise those kids, but they end up being a leader. So hats off to them. But talking about my career, honestly, I ended up in marketing by fluke.
Oh, okay.
I always had aspirations to be a fashion designer. I knew
Oh,
that's what I wanted to be, always, ever since I was a kid. And sort of circumstances led me to where I am today. I ended up going into graphic design. And I still wanted to do something with design. And I didn't buy the fact that graphic design was for me. But I ended up choosing it and I ended up loving it. What I discovered through it is really my exceptional eye for design. I do everything through that lens. I've been able to solve complex problems, business problems using design, but everything I guess what differentiates me in that way is like I put a lens of design to everything that I do. As far as, becoming a leader and being a female leader, it's been a journey. I can tell you, like during my time, I've had about 20 years in the industry. And I was one of the fortunate ones. I really grew my career at Office Max. I started with other jobs earlier, but really when I came to Office Max is where I grew my career. I was there for 10 years. And I wouldn't have been there for 10 years if I wasn't growing.
Mm-hmm.
I started there as a graphic designer and left as a director leading the entire brand strategy team. So,
Okay, hold on. Hold on. Time out. Okay, there's so many things I want to ask you questions already because I find that a lot of I think women are more intuitive and like there's actually a whole bunch of scientific study behind that too. But like women are way more intuitive and we lead more with feels and we're radically more open to accepting that part of ourselves and how it drives our decisions, right? Than our male counterparts, which is fine. But one of the things that I often hear from female leaders, first of all, we are radically well versed in discrediting ourselves. It's really like it's really sad because we're so good at it.
it
But
is.
one of the things that they'll say to themselves is, well, I'm more creatively minded, which is not suited for leadership because leadership, you have to have the numbers and you have to run the spreadsheets and it's more a different part of the brain than the creative side of the brain. You started honoring your creativity. You started a profession with design, again, a creative art form. And yet you still within, the 10 years that you were with Office Max, you excelled in a leadership capacity. So like how'd you do that? Like how did you find space for the creativity, but also like the numbers and all the things that come with leadership that is not sexy creative, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. I think I've had great leaders, for one. I've been very, very lucky to have guidance from, like we talked about Tim, he's been one of my mentors.
Mm,
And even my boss, who I reported into initially, he was truly creative, but always guided me to be more well rounded,
mm-hmm,
pushed me in areas, and even as an individual contributor, took me around to places to like photo shoots and had me meet with marketers and had me
mm,
in meetings when I wasn't comfortable. Honestly, I had no experience, I had no business doing that. But he just pushed me in, and that led me to, kind of force myself to learn
yeah.
through, and I've had many failures. I have no reservation saying that anymore. I will tell you, I went through a long period at Office Max because I was young and I was moving and growing very fast with little training.
Hmm.
I had many failures, and it's hard. It's hard to get people to trust you. And I
Yeah.
had insecurities. So initially in my career, I wasn't willing to let go of things and trust the team to do it because I can do it better and I can do
Yeah.
it faster.
Yeah.
But it's not about that.
Yeah.
And I learned, it took me a while. And I think any designer that you talk to, it's a really, really difficult transition because you can do it better.
Yeah.
And to get somebody else to do what you can do is practically impossible.
Yeah.
In like if you have a vision. So that was a learning for me. As far as like, growing, because I had great leaders and good exposure, in my younger years, I was leading bigger meetings with like CMOs, and Office Max had like some 900 stores at the time, and we were managing everything from like brand to marketing, direct marketing, their B2B, B2C, everything. So I was leading their big store presentations for seasonals.
Oh, wow.
I It was nerve wracking.
Yeah.
First time I had to get in front of the CMO, but like over time, you develop a relationship through that, right? And what I've learned is that it doesn't matter what position you're in. I read this on LinkedIn somewhere that your title is borrowed.
Ooh.
So, and it was such a great thing that I always remember that you are with a company and you have that borrowed title. That is not what, makes you or who you are. It doesn't define you. So in my head, all executives are normal people,
Mm-hmm.
and they have kids, they have a life, and
Mm-hmm.
so I try to keep that as I meet people and
Mm-hmm.
talk to everyone. And it's actually taught me a lot. It's taught me to not feel like I can't interact with different levels of people. It doesn't matter.
I
you
love
know
that. I number one, I appreciate that you were the recipient very early on in your career of good, generous leaders that took you under their wing. It's like the greatest gift. I've been the recipient of both, where people were very generous and took me along the ride, and then those that very much communicated that I need to pay my dues before that would happen. So like, it's really sweet that that happened. Hey Rainmakers, it's Veronica, and we'll get back to today's episode. But before that, I have an exciting invitation for all of you aspiring, ambitious marketing leaders. If you are serious about advancing your career in marketing and you're looking for an expert to give you some personal insights, guidance, tips, then I'm going to invite you to schedule a free Pathway to Promotion call with me. This is a special one-on-one call with just you and me to discuss your current roadblocks in your career, your long-term aspirations and ambition, and the next best step for you and your personal promotion. Head to pathwaycall.com or click the link in my show notes to schedule your free Pathway to Promotion call. Now back to today's episode. When you were at Office Max, is this also when you started like with your own family? Like, I'm curious just like the timeline between your professional growth, but also your personal expansion with your own family.
There's an interesting twist there. So I started at Office Max pretty young. I had a daughter at the time, and I
Okay.
was a single mom,
Okay.
and I had a 4-year-old.
Oh my gosh.
And so those days were rough because I'd take her in the morning to her Montessori, drive back 15 minutes, and it was just crazy. During my time at Office Max, I remarried and ended up having 2 additional kids. So I had 3 kids. And it was rough.
Just say it.
I can say that if I didn't have a supportive husband, it was, I literally was at work all day.
Yeah.
And during those times, he decided that he's going to work from home.
Yeah.
Because one of us needed to be doing that. So that was a lot of support for me. I've also been very lucky because I've had my parents and his parents to watch the kids. So my kids have always had people.
Yeah. People in the family.
Yeah. We've had a lot of family around. So we've been very fortunate that way. But, I wanted to kind of get back to what you said earlier about just growing and like me starting on the creative side and kind of moving up. And what I learned being at Office Max is there's still that stigma with creatives design because I saw a lot of people being bypassed for promotion. Leadership because they were on the creative side. And I definitely did not want to get stuck in that position. So one of the things that I did, and I'm glad I did, is I went back and did my MBA.
Okay.
And I went back and again, being an art major, thinking of going to a really good school is not something I ever thought of.
Sure.
And that credit is like to my husband. He's like, if you're going to go, you got to go to the best school that's there. You got to at least try. And again, I was fortunate. I was able to get a recommendation from my CMO at the time. So I had a lot of support that helped me push forward. But that MBA, I think, helped differentiate me from just being a creative.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And it helped. It definitely made me more well-rounded because you don't take finance at art school. So it made me more of a well-rounded person and positioned me to be able to interact and comfortably speak, in those areas.
Okay, hold on a minute. So you're fully employed, you got some kids, and you're getting an MBA. Sister, how'd you do that? Like, how did you find the space, the capacity to do arguably three very intensive endeavors to be fully engaged in your job and also learning at like an accelerated rate in this program, also the demands of home. And even with the best, because I had the same thing that you did. The Cubans came, right? Like I popped out a baby and the Cubans were like, yep, give it to us. Like it's just part of the Latin culture, at least in my family. Yeah. Like they got really close, and when the kids are little, what you benefit the most from is hands. Like who can hold this, who can literally feed, hold, rock, like help with the hands. As your kids get older, now it's more of the intellectual battles. But like,
Yes.
I remember when they were little, it was just really nice to have a lot of hands that were willing to help me. But I still really struggled with mom guilt. I was not prepared. I had been warned about the lack of sleep. I was warned about a number of things that would happen to my body, but I was not prepared for the emotional toll of mom guilt. So even though I put my children in my husband's hands, my beautiful family who I love. Like it wasn't my hands, and I felt guilt because of that. And I'm just curious how you had capacity for all the things that you were doing. And then if you personally struggled with any type of guilt, that if you ever were successful in overcoming it.
Yeah, I mean, I think my oldest, when I first started working and she was 4 and I was a single mom, that's, I think, I
Mm-hmm.
had the most guilt,
Mm-hmm.
because she was literally left at daycare for the entire day.
Yeah.
And as like when I started my MBA, she was gone every other weekend. So I set it up in the way that this program was every other weekend. And it went from Friday to Sunday. And you're in school all day Friday. And Office Max gave me the opportunity to take that day as a,
Wow.
as a learning. And I went every other weekend basically, and I lived on campus. So that's where it helped me to be focused. And before I came home, I was done with everything that was due. Just because once I got home, it was done. I
Yeah.
had two little ones, and it's actually honestly easier when their kids are little. Like you said,
Mm-hmm.
you need hands, right? But they don't
Mm-hmm.
remember. It's when
Mm-hmm.
they're older.
Mm-hmm.
So if my 4-year old, or like at the time 6-year old, she didn't see me as much. She was more vocal about it. But then she
Yes.
was gone on the weekends that I was gone.
Yeah, sure.
It worked out for me from that respect. But yes, there's always that guilt. And I think that, over time I've been able to kind of, overcome that in
Mm-hmm.
the way that I stayed home after Office Max. I took a break. I
Mm-hmm.
was home for 6 months.
Mm-hmm.
And I learned very quickly that I'm not fit to be a stay-at-home mom.
I know, I get it.
So,
I get it. That's funny. That's really
yes,
funny.
I am a better person when I am working.
That's
So,
fun. Yeah. I'm
yeah.
the same way. I'm cut
Yeah.
from that same cloth. I have two little boys, and so they are getting older now where if I have too close of business trips, so like
Mhm.
they're, a week apart or like back to back, I'll definitely hear them. It will absolutely be vocalized. Like again, you're leaving again. I'm like, "Oh, yep, again." When it's better spread across, then they look forward to it because it's the boys' weekend with dad and the boys. I'm like, okay. So like
A
I'm
good time.
grateful for to your point, I'm grateful for a supportive partner who can help me in that. But I just think about, and I know this is a passion of yours as well, like, helping women become leaders. And so, when I'm in these conversations with aspiring leaders, this tends to come up is either they don't have the supportive family structure or the overwhelming mom guilt, or it's just a number of things. I was just recently on a phone call with a marketer who is like, her job is like draining her soul, but she's a single mom, and she's like, I'm too fearful to go somewhere new and put my daughter in any type of jeopardy of uncertainty just because I'm personally miserable. And I'm like, whoa. So she's so fearful to like go pursue to see if the grass could potentially be greener somewhere else. Because what if it's not? And then she's, putting her and her daughter in a worse off situation than just her being bored and drained. When you're mentoring these, I know this is again passion project for you, but like when you're working with women or you're trying to mentor women and be an example to them, how do you help them through some of these kind of crises, so that they can keep pursuing their dreams?
I think one of the key things that people have to remember, women especially, is when being considered for a promotion, and if you're looking to be promoted and if you're looking to grow,
Hmm.
it's important that you talk about it. It's important to talk to your leaders and let them know that you want to be in the running.
Okay.
Because more often than not, if you're just a quiet one sitting, it can be assumed that, oh, she has too much going on. She doesn't want to be taking on more,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
And you have to make sure that they understand that that's what you want.
Hmm.
There's a career path that you're looking at. If your leaders are not setting time with you on a regular basis, you make sure you do it. You make sure to set the meeting and say, hey,
Mm.
I want to pick on your brain. This is where I am. This is where I want to be. Who else can I connect with in the company or outside the company? Do you know people? Do you know networking? Basically, and you start with your boss if you have a good relationship, right? Or it could be anyone. I think Tim and I developed a really good relationship when he wasn't even my boss.
Hmm.
He
Mm-hmm.
didn't become my boss until like much later, towards the end of, but we always had a great relationship.
Mm-hmm.
And it's always somebody I looked at and I'm like, I knew I could go to.
Like a mentor,
It's
yeah.
really important to let them know. The other piece I'll say is never be afraid to ask if you feel like you should be promoted. I haven't,
Ooh.
I'll tell you,
Ooh.
I have not. All my promotions have been after I asked.
Stop.
Nope.
Really?
Yes. Every
So
single
you
one.
knocked on the door, and you having the level of confidence to knock on the door, it was opened for you.
Yeah, I actually had to fight for it, but I asked, in fact, my last promotion, I, sent a note with everything that I was asked to do in the last 3 years and everything that I had accomplished in return. And I asked a question to help me understand what am I missing. And if there is something missing, then I need to know because I
So I
need
can
to,
fix it. Yeah.
right? But
Yeah.
I need to know that why are others being promoted
Mm-hmm.
and I'm
Mm-hmm.
not being considered.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And, it was in some ways beautiful because I was told that, yeah, like I don't know. That's a great point.
Mm-hmm.
And I was promoted. But part of me also feels like, why did I have to go ask?
100%. A hundred
It's like,
percent.
why do I have to make this effort to ask? But again, like knowing where we are, don't be afraid to ask.
Well, okay. So do you mind if I ask you more questions on, because one of the things, again, I run lots of programs that help marketers get further along in their careers. And so one of the things that comes up, whether it's in the interview kind of hiring process when they're trying to negotiate their upfront salary, or it's in like a promotion kind of conversation, like I want more money. One of the things that they just trip up on is like, I don't know what to say. So, like, what do you say? Hey, boss, I deserve a promotion. How do you feel about that? Like how, and I guess, and I don't know if this is something that you learned in your MBA program or it's because of great leadership and mentorship from your peers and your colleagues, but like having confidence to even initiate the conversation is one part of the equation. The other part is like having the structure or the words or at least some level of preparation to
Mhm.
then engage in this conversation where if you got pushed back, you would be ready with a rebuttal. So how would you mentally prepare for that type of dialogue? I'm very curious. Like, did you like hype yourself up and play on some Beyonce? Did you like watch The Gladiator? Like, how did you get yourself into a place of level of confidence, but also the words to communicate and articulate your value?
So I think, I don't know that I had the level of confidence per se always.
I don't know, man. I'm very impressed.
However, because I always had ongoing conversations,
Yeah.
I've always had a good relationships with, my bosses, where even if I wasn't happy about something, we had a conversation. So they already knew what my aspirations were, where I wanted to be. So it was easier to say, okay, what next?
Hmm.
And how long until? What do I need to do? I was always on the next thing, right? So for me, it was always like I get bored very easily with things. So I'm always thinking, I'm like, okay, I'm gonna do this, I'm gonna learn this, and then what,
Then what?
right? And like sometimes I was asked, like, what do you want to do?
Hmm.
Like,
Hmm.
okay, you're saying this today, but what do you want to do from 10 years from now? Where do you want to
Hmm.
be?
Hmm.
And initially, I'm like, wow, I don't know.
Hmm.
And right. So I was kind of forced to like think a lot about that. So that's kind of where my conversations always initiated and started.
Hmm.
But the struggle that I've seen
Hmm.
the most is not even so much about like my leaders not wanting to promote me, but the bureaucracy within like HR in the
Mm.
levels and salaries, and like you see different marketing versus tech, and you have
Mhm.
directors and they're at completely different level because
Mhm.
tech is perceived to be very, meaningful, and I'm like, okay, you try running your company without marketing and tell me how far you get along, right?
Mm.
So those are the things that I had to deal with in my days. Since then, what I've learned from that is when I hire for my team, I never hire anyone at the lowest. Like if the grade has a low, medium, high,
Mm-hmm.
I bring people in medium. I will
Interesting.
not go for a low. And I try to bring talent on that are not necessarily at the beginning,
Yeah.
but more often than not, HR is going to push you to bring people in at the lower because their story is always that, oh, you want to have room for them to grow. Well, I've been stuck there before where I bring somebody in and they're not able to bring them up, and it takes forever.
Mm.
So I negotiate up front with
Yeah.
HR when I bring
Yeah.
people on my team because I've had to go through that hurdle. I don't want others to
I
deal with
love that. And I love that not repeating history
that.
for yourself and then making like, well, if you had to pay your dues, then somebody else should pay their dues. Like, I just really appreciate that because like I said, I've been the recipient on the other side of that philosophy. But I have a question for you because right now you're the head of global brand experience at Chicken Soup for the Soul, which is like a beloved brand. And I mean, I think almost a lot of people know this brand.
Yeah, they know the publishing side of it for sure.
How did this come to be? Like, how did you find yourself in this situation? Was it through networking? Was it cold? Like, I'm just curious how, because you didn't just, I know that you stayed at Office Max for quite a period of time, but it's not the only place. And so when you're pursuing new opportunities, do you have a formula or like a compass to your madness? Like when you're out, journeying in the wilderness, how do you know it's the next right place?
How I ended up, again, I have always loved retail.
Okay.
And after Office Max, it's really hard because Chicago doesn't have a lot of retail,
Mm-hmm.
corporate retail. It's limited. And I knew I couldn't move out of here. I
Mm-hmm.
almost did, but then I didn't because
Mm-hmm.
and I where I ended up is I interviewed with Redbox.
Mhm, mhm,
And Redbox was also just, it brought joy to people. And I know when I first started, it was just like, such a cool thing. And so that's where I was. I was with Redbox and I went into that field, not having any entertainment experience, to be honest. Redbox considered itself to be a retail brand because their boxes live at retailers.
mhm,
So, which is kind of what drew me in. That was like the next closest
mhm.
thing I could get into. And Redbox was acquired by Chicken Soup for the Soul.
Got it.
So that's how I ended up.
Got it. Got it. Got it. Got it. Well, but you know what? Sometimes during mergers and acquisitions, not everybody makes it. So I think it's also a testament to you as well that like you are somebody that they saw for the future after this acquisition as well. Okay, I have so many questions for you, but I can't. So I want to afford you the opportunity to ask me the final question on today's podcast because yeah, I just think that we have a lot in common. I'm curious what you're going to ask me.
So, yeah, I have. It's been in my mind since
Okay.
I received the invite. So, I've listened to some of your podcasts
Hmm, hmm.
with other leaders. How did you make the decision to have this podcast? And what made you want to have a podcast,
Yeah.
first of all? And how did you like end up where you are today? And
Yeah.
do you love it?
Okay. So, like you, I did
Mhm.
not have on my vision board one day to be a podcast host. So, like, it's not like you chose marketing either, right? Like, it's just
Yeah,
you're like, I'm a
exactly.
graphic designer. I would not be honest to say, like, oh, one day I had this vision that I'd be this like podcast host. Actually, it wasn't even on the peripheral at all. I don't even still presently have this identity that I'm like this podcast host and I'm really great at. I don't. I think, have you ever seen those like Russian nesting dolls where it's like a doll within
Oh,
a
yeah, yeah,
doll
yeah.
within a doll. And so you keep opening it and it just keeps popping, until they're teeny tiny. I feel like finding my way in my career has been very similar to that process of like, I like business. I like marketing. I like, like it just kind of kept getting more and more clear and refined to me, the doll within the doll of
Mhm.
what I really enjoyed doing and the types of marketing that I enjoy doing and the type of marketing strategy that I like to deploy and the type of marketing collaborations or colleagues or just a number of things. And so like the heart of the podcast is relationships because my number one favorite form of marketing is relationship marketing over social media marketing, search marketing, paid marketing. Relationship marketing is I think I've never said this actually on anywhere publicly because I just actually literally my brain just connected it. But I remember I grew up with Cuban immigrants who came here, and any formal education they had from Cuba was dissolved as soon as they came into a new country that didn't recognize any of their
Mhm.
former training. So even though my mom was in medical school, that stops. Everything stops, right? And so when my parents came here, they needed to basically pick a career very quickly and didn't have a lot of resources or money to like go into school and things like that. So they picked up a trade and they started an air conditioning company in South Florida because what does everybody need in Boca Raton? It's air conditioning. It's
Yeah.
hot. And they had the business for 30 something years, 33 years by the time they ended up selling and retiring just like a year ago. But the growth of the company was really relationship marketing. Like it was somebody knew Carlos and then they loved Carlos and then they knew Sophia and they told everybody about Sophia and Carlos. So like I watched my parents grow a multi-million dollar business. I mean, the real, like the truest definition of the American dream, because everybody knew Carlos and Sophia and they loved Carlos and Sophia. And even to this day, even though they've sold the business, like their financial planner used to be a client of theirs. And like, it's just, I've seen my parents build a brand new life for them in a brand new country. And they would never describe it to you as relationship marketing, but as a marketer, I'm like, this is relationship marketing at its finest. Like it's just knowing the right people. And so back to the podcast, I love meeting new people. I love conversing with new people. I love people of depth. I rather have, a small Rolodex of people with grit and determination and depth to them than just shallow, which is why like I social media is not my favorite thing in the entire world. I just don't love it. It's so like anti what I am and what I stand for. But the podcast is a tool for me to initiate more relationships. It's in fact, one of the greatest tools that you can do is to invite somebody on the podcast to tell their story. So for me, it's like, it's my version of a business card. Like, hey, Durriya, I would love to get to know your story. Would you like to be on the podcast? That was really the heart and the purpose of the podcast. And I just happen to be very nosy. And so I think being nosy and curious makes me ask some better questions than not. But
Yes.
yeah, that's really the story and why I did it. And I think everything that I do, the emphasis is on relationships.
That's wonderful. I
Yeah.
absolutely love that.
Yeah, yeah. I think what's also helpful too for me is like it takes the pressure off the performance aspect of it. Like if nobody listened to this podcast episode that you and I were recording, I wouldn't actually care because for me, I just got to know you. It takes the edge and the pressure off. Like I don't even look at the number of downloads. I don't. It doesn't. That's not the intent. I don't care. And so that's what's also really cool about it. It's very pure. It still is pure to me, and it's a really joyful experience to do it.
Yeah, no, that's wonderful. I mean, I 100% agree. I didn't even realize that I think that is what relationship and where it can get you until much later in life. And I realized in the past, like two job switches that I've had, I have a few people on my team who started with me
Mm-hmm.
very young at office
Mm-hmm.
management. They're still,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
we've been, kind of like moved together.
Yeah.
And it's wonderful to have people who you can trust
Yeah.
like that, and meeting new people, it's
Yeah.
just like I'm so glad I got to meet you. uh it is no, truly, it's wonderful. Everything that you've brought up I can connect with, being, my parents immigrated here when I was
Mm-hmm.
12, so
Mm-hmm.
I can relate to that. And it's hard for people to relate to these types of things, so it's really nice to
It is
meet
nice. It
people.
is nice. And I mean, it's a testament to your leadership of people who continue wanting to work with you years down the road. I mean, that's like to me the greatest compliment of your leadership is that like they're still learning from you. They are still inspired to be near you. They still desire to do hard things in your presence. Like, I think that's such a beautiful testament to your leadership. And I could not be more grateful that you were on today's Rainmaker podcast.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for joining us on today's Rainmaker podcast. Marketers help other marketers. So if there's a marketer in your life who could really use a new perspective in a way that helps them advance their career, please pass this episode forward, share, leave us a review. Everything helps as we embark on helping as many marketers elevate themselves inside and out. You can always visit veronicarami.com for today's show notes, additional links to some free resources and tools for you to help you advance your career. You can always connect with us on social media at Via Romney if you want more behind the scenes or a way for us to connect personally. Until next time, my friends, make it rain.